Now, the fate of South Korea's Yoon Suk-yeol hangs in the balance as the Constitutional Court hears the final arguments in his impeachment trial. It's the last chance for the president to defend the leader to defend his presidency. Judges will then decide whether they want to remove him from office over his martial law declaration last December or restore him to full presidential powers. A verdict is widely expected by the middle of March. The suspended leader is also facing separate charges of insurrection and abuse of power, or they could see him behind bars for life or even face the death penalty. And much more on this, we're joined by Grace Shin in the studio with us. Grace, this final hearing is specifically for impeachment for President Yoon Suk-yeol. It started in his absence. What has happened since the start of this trial today?
It started around 2 p.m. local time, and right now it's around 9 p.m. local time. So it means that 7 hours has passed. And given that it's the last impeachment hearing, it's lasting longer than expected. Now, 2 hours had been granted to each side, the parliament demanding Yoon's impeachment and Yoon's team, who has been demanding of restoring his presidential power. Now, lawyers for parliament have argued that if Yoon is reinstated, he could try to impose the martial law again, which they've been claiming has been unconstitutional and threatening the nation's security. They repeatedly pointed to how Yoon's martial law is unconstitutional, whereas Yoon's legal team have been arguing that Yoon had the executive right as president to imposing a martial law decree because South Korea was in fact in a state of emergency. Now, Yoon's team has been reiterating that the opposition party-led National Assembly made it difficult for the president to be passing key reform policies, whether that be on pension, labor union, education, economy, or medical personnel, as well as passing key budgetary plans. Now, the hearing will end with Yoon's closing statement. For that one, it's an unlimited amount of time, which is why it's very difficult for anyone to know when the hearing will last until. But eyes are on whether President Yoon will apologize, because observers believe that this would most likely be the last chance for the suspended president to make a public apology on this matter. And that's because the hearing is being streamed live for anyone to see. Now, experts believe that Yoon's apology may pose a lot of significance and symbolism because it may further fuel more support from his supporters that have been rallying for each and every one of his hearings in front of the Constitutional Court. As to what President Yoon will say, most likely he'll be reiterating his poise as to it was constitutional for him to be doing this. There was only rightfully ways that the parliamentary being majority led by the Democratic Party was an abuse of power. So we'll have to see whether what he says and whether he'll apologize.
All right. Whether or not Mr. Yoon's defense, or his defense team rather, their argument about it was already in a state of emergency, that actually carries the day and he is restored to power or he is removed for good. We've said we're likely to get a verdict by the middle of next month, but between now and then, what are all the steps that we can expect from South Korean authorities?
It's a waiting game now. A ruling for this impeachment trial will be made most likely in mid-March. Now, if the Constitutional Court upholds Yoon's impeachment, that would mean Yoon would be serving as the shortest living president in South Korea's democratic history. He only came to power in May of 2022. The country must then hold a new presidential election within 60 days. Now, I think it's more worthy of noting the polarization that Yoon has been causing, Yoon's impeachment trial has been causing. If you really pin down the rhetoric and the narrative that has been used so far, is that Yoon's legal team has been emphasizing that the martial law and the political fiasco that was caused from the whole martial law decree in the first place was actually on the opposition bloc, the Democratic Party. Now, if Yoon's impeachment case and the verdict comes through him being stripped out of his presidential powers, as I said, we will be holding early elections. But observers are pointing to who the next presidential candidate is with so much polarization among public sentiment.
But for Mr. Yoon himself, and this gets confusing because there was one day late last week, when he was actually attending two separate trials for impeachment, for one, and for the criminal charge of insurrection on the very same day. Will the verdict, I assume that insurrection, that case will not wrap up before the impeachment trial delivers its verdict.
Exactly.
Should that be the case, how will this verdict on impeachment affect, if it does affect, this verdict on insurrection?
Whether it will affect his criminal charge and trial is still up to question, of course. But what I can say for sure was, as you mentioned, Yoon was arrested in January after a weeks-long standoff between investigators and his presidential security team. He's since been detained at a center near Seoul. Now, whether Yoon remains president or not, for the insurrection trial, there's no way out. Now, if he's impeached, that means he has no immunity to any criminal charges. But in the first place, insurrection has no way out, even though you're president or not. Now, Yoon's insurrection trial is expected to take months for a verdict to come out. Legal analysts believe that this could be reached by late 2025 or early 2026. Meantime, the court is reviewing a request by Yoon's lawyers to revoke his arrest order and release him from custody. But chances are that's not going to happen because there's still many legal challenges. He also is facing the prospect of another legal battle. Police have been investigating Yoon on the suspicion of special obstruction of public duty since around January 3rd, and this could be punishable by another 5 years in jail.
All right. These, of course, stressing again a separate trial that he's facing, Grace. Right now, today, the headline news is the last day of his hearing for his impeachment trial. Thanks so much for explaining all that to us. CNA's Grace Shin.